Hello, everyone. Tyler Harris wasn't a man with extravagant dreams. His wishes were modest. He longed for a peaceful life, a loving wife, kids, a comfortable house, and a few toys to tinker with. He still drove the old Ford F-150 his dad left him when he passed away 10 years ago. The truck was already a relic back then, having seen 15 years of wear and tear. His father had been a carpenter and a farmer, while his mother earned a living cleaning rooms at a hotel near Bells, Tennessee. Tyler's roots ran deep in Bells, a tiny town so small that as soon as you saw the "Welcome to Bells" sign, you'd find yourself reading the back of it, "Thanks for visiting." He attended every school the town had to offer: Bells Elementary, Middle, High, and even the Mini-Mart, all housed under one roof. Growing up, he wasn't the kind of kid anyone messed with, thanks to his sister Amanda. Her boyfriend was the local tough guy, and people quickly learned not to cross Amanda's little brother. Tyler didn't need much to be happy. School was all right. He had a handful of friends, a girlfriend, and an old clunker of a car that got him where he needed to go. On weekends, he'd tinker with it, dreaming of the day it might run like new. But if there was one thing Tyler excelled at, it was hunting. He could handle a gun before he could properly walk, well, stumble. It didn't matter if it was a cap gun or the real thing. Tyler was a natural. So, when an Army recruiter rolled through Bells, it didn't take much convincing to get Tyler to sign up and aim for Army Ranger training. His dad wasn't thrilled but understood that Tyler needed to carve his own path. Right after graduation, Tyler shipped off to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. When his drill sergeant first laid eyes on him, he scoffed. "Get back on the bus, kid. Ranger school's for men, not boys." Standing just over 5 feet 7 inches and weighing about 150 pounds, Tyler didn't exactly look the part. But he was used to being underestimated, and he wasn't fazed. By the first night in the field, Tyler had flipped the script. The drill sergeant, trying to sneak up on Tyler, found himself staring down the barrel of Tyler's M16 instead. It was 2 a.m., and Tyler was the only one who heard the sergeant creeping through the woods. By the end of Ranger School, Tyler had earned the top spot in his class, making his parents proud. After completing his enlistment, Tyler had seen his fair share of action, taking on missions so classified they left people wondering where on earth he'd been. But Tyler wasn't one to talk about it. While stationed at his last base, he used his spare time to earn a degree in accounting. It was there he met Allison. Allison was a striking woman, 5 feet 2 inches, 103 pounds, with auburn hair and hazel eyes that seemed to catch everyone's attention. Heads turned wherever she went, and she knew it. Men offered her everything under the sun, but Allison wasn't swayed. She was searching for a particular type of man. Someone quiet, laid back, and, most importantly, easy to control. When she met Tyler, she knew he was exactly what she'd been looking for. The only problem? Tyler thought she was way out of his league and acted like it. If she smiled at him, he'd look away. If she approached, he'd find an excuse to leave. One Saturday, Tyler was sitting in the chapel for Mass when Allison spotted him. Determined to make her move, she slipped into the pew behind him. Before she could tap his shoulder, Tyler spoke without turning around. "Yes, what can I do for you?" Startled that he'd sensed her presence, Allison smiled. And that was all it took. Tyler was hooked, and their romance began. When Tyler brought Allison home to meet his family, everyone was in awe. Allison, with her MBA, top-of-the-class achievements, and fluency in 4 languages, was a marvel to Belle's small-town folks. They couldn't believe Tyler had landed someone like her. Tyler's dad was happy but gave him a word of caution. "Son, when you've got a woman like that, you always keep your eyes open. Love her, treat her right, but don't let her walk all over you. Stand your ground when you need to." Tyler promised his dad, and he was a man who kept his promises. 10 years flew by. Tyler had built a successful auditing business, while Allison climbed the ranks to become a mid-level sales executive at a major department store. They didn't have kids, but to everyone around them, they looked like the perfect married couple. As far as Tyler was concerned, life was good. One day, after finishing an audit at a client's factory, Tyler decided to surprise Allison at her office and take her out for lunch. He'd never visited her workplace before. Tyler had always been careful not to disrupt Allison while she was at work. Similarly, She had never called him during office hours either. If she was going to be late, she'd leave a message at home or give him a quick call after hours. That day, after finding her office building, Tyler made his way to her floor. Outside her office, a secretary's desk was stationed in the corridor. Tyler approached, but before he could say much, the secretary looked up and asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Allison's husband," he replied plainly. The secretary chuckled dismissively. "Allison's husband? No, you're not. Her husband is 6'3", blonde, good-looking, and works upstairs. So why don't you just move along?" Tyler remained calm. "How about you buzz Mrs. Harris and let her clear this up?" Instead of following his suggestion, the secretary called security. Moments later, 2 guards appeared and grabbed Tyler, ready to escort him out. Just then, the office door opened and Allison walked out, hand in hand with the very man the secretary had described as her husband. Allison froze, her face a mixture of shock and panic. She didn't say a word as Tyler was dragged away. In that moment, the truth unraveled before him. For who knew how long Allison had been parading around with Justin, her work husband, fooling everyone into believing they were married. Tyler left the building in silence, crushed but not surprised. The pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. This affair had to have been going on for a while, long enough for her colleagues to believe it was legitimate. On the drive home, Tyler's phone rang. Allison's name popped up on the caller ID, but he ignored it. The phone buzzed incessantly until, frustrated, Tyler rolled down his window and tossed it onto the highway. When he reached home, he started packing his things. His thoughts churned as he folded clothes and gathered his belongings. He realized why Allison had always been so against having children. It wasn't that she didn't want them. She just didn't want them with him. The thought stung, but it didn't change his resolve. She had humiliated him, made him a fool, and he refused to live like that. At her office, Allison's secretary laughed with her after the incident. "You wouldn't believe it," she told Allison. "Some plain, scrawny guy came in here claiming to be your husband." "I mean, really? You?" Allison forced a laugh, but deep down, she felt rattled. She'd always known she was out of Tyler's league and figured he should have been grateful for the time she gave him. As far as she was concerned, Tyler had served his purpose, and it was time to move on. She finished her workday and headed home, rehearsing lies she thought might pacify him. When she pulled into the driveway and saw Tyler's car parked in its usual spot, she felt a flicker of hope. But as she entered the house and called his name, the silence was deafening. Tyler was gone. Strangely, she didn't cry or even feel regret. If anything, she was relieved she wouldn't have to explain herself. She told herself it was time for bigger and better things. 2 weeks later, during a lunch outing with Justin and a couple of company VPs, a man dressed as a waiter approached Allison. "Are you Allison Harris?" he asked, handing her an envelope when she confirmed. "You've been served," he said curtly before walking away. Her face turned crimson. Furious and humiliated, she bolted to the restroom, clutching the papers. How had Tyler managed to file for divorce so quickly? And to serve her like this, in front of everyone? When she returned to the table, Justin had smoothed things over, telling the VPs it was an insurance matter. Allison felt a twinge of gratitude for Justin's quick thinking. 3 months later, Allison found herself in her attorney's office reviewing the divorce paperwork. Tyler wasn't asking for anything, which puzzled her, until she learned something that stunned her. Well, Tyler's attorney began. Tyler sold his company. Allison's head snapped up. What? To who? To his sister, Amanda, the attorney replied nonchalantly. For how much? She demanded. For $2, he said with a faint smirk. Your share will be mailed to you after the divorce is finalized. Allison's blood boiled. He can't do that. That company is community property. Half of it belongs to me, she exclaimed, her voice rising. And where is he? Why isn't he here? The attorney simply handed his card to her lawyer, snapped his briefcase shut, and left with a chuckle. Meanwhile, Tyler was back in Bells, sitting at his dad's old farmhouse. He and Amanda were negotiating the sale of their family property with a Nissan executive. The 200-acre farm, conveniently located near the freeway with a railway line running along one side, was the perfect spot for a new plant. The town buzzed with excitement at the prospect of new jobs and businesses arriving. Tyler and Amanda agreed to a $35 million deal, splitting the money evenly. On top of that, Amanda's firm secured a 6-year consulting contract with Nissan. Life had taken a sharp turn for Tyler, but for the first time in a long while, things were looking up. After the land deal was finalized, Tyler found himself chatting with the Nissan VP who had overseen the transaction. "So, now that you've sold your business, what's next on your agenda?" the VP asked. Tyler shrugged. "Honestly, I haven't given it much thought. Why do you ask?" The VP smiled. "Well, we've done our due diligence, and your background came up in the process. We were wondering if you'd consider stepping in as the new head of accounting for the plant." Tyler raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's an interesting offer. I'd need to take a closer look at the full package Nissan offers, but my initial thought is, I'm very interested." Meanwhile, Allison and Justin caught wind of Nissan's plans to build a plant in Bells. They saw this as their chance to become the town's new power couple. But for Allison to solidify her position, she needed to expedite her divorce. She accepted Tyler's settlement offer without a fight and instructed her attorney to push the paperwork through the courts as quickly as possible. Within 45 days, the divorce was finalized. A week later, Allison and Justin tied the knot in a modest Las Vegas chapel ceremony. Tyler heard about the wedding through local gossip. While the news made him frown, he kept his thoughts to himself. Tyler soon began his new role at the Nissan plant and threw himself into the job with his usual dedication. His hard work didn't go unnoticed, and before long, he was promoted to Vice President of Finance and Administration, overseeing both the HR and accounting departments. Tyler reported directly to Alan Brown, the regional executive VP, who admired Tyler's no-nonsense management approach. The two developed a strong professional relationship built on mutual respect. 2 years after his divorce, Tyler was thriving. He enjoyed his job and valued the rapport he'd built with Alan. One day, Alan invited him to his office for a private conversation. Tyler wasn't sure what to expect, and his curiosity deepened when Alan explained that Nissan had recently acquired a struggling department store chain headquartered near Bells. Alan asked Tyler to evaluate the new business, particularly its personnel and payroll operations. Tyler and his team conducted a thorough analysis and prepared a detailed report. The results weren't promising. Saving the company would require cutting 10% of management and 15% of the hourly workforce. Once Alan reviewed the recommendations, he arranged a meeting to deliver the bad news to the store's management. Folding chairs were set up in a staging area, with 2 large tables flanking a podium. Allison and Justin, now middle managers in the company, hoped to speak with Alan privately before the meeting began. But Alan told them to wait for Mr. Harris, not bothering to specify the first name. When Tyler Harris walked into the room, Allison and Justin froze, their faces draining of color. Allison's shock was palpable. She hadn't realized how far Tyler had come since their split. Alan noticed their stunned expressions and said something in Japanese to Tyler, who laughed and replied in kind. Allison, still reeling, couldn't believe what she was hearing. How had Tyler, a so-called simpleton, learned Japanese, let alone climbed so high in Nissan's ranks? Alan introduced Tyler to the room as the head of administration, emphasizing his role in both HR and accounting. Allison sat in disbelief, her mind racing. When had this transformation happened? She'd been too busy with Justin to notice. Justin nudged her back to reality as Tyler began his presentation. Tyler outlined the company's dire financial situation, explaining that severance packages wouldn't be offered to laid-off managers. The previous owners had drained the company's resources before selling it, leaving Nissan to pour in cash just to keep the doors open. Laid-off employees would have to rely on state unemployment benefits, which amounted to very little. Tyler also announced that 25% of middle management positions would be cut to preserve as many labor jobs as possible. He concluded by explaining the process for individual interviews, where decisions about who stayed and who went would be finalized. As the meeting wrapped up, Tyler walked out with Alan, ignoring Allison's attempt to get his attention. She turned to Justin, her voice a mix of shock and disbelief. "Holy shit," Justin muttered. "Yeah, holy shit is right," Allison replied, her face etched with worry. And this is an at-will employment state, she added grimly. Justin looked confused. What does that mean? Allison stared at him, dumbfounded by his ignorance. How had he climbed the corporate ladder while knowing so little about basic employment law? Meaning they can fire us for any reason or no reason at all, Allison explained to Justin, her tone sharp with frustration. Justin mulled over her words, then turned to her with a serious expression. Well, Allison, you're gonna have to get back on that country bumpkin's good side. Allison shot him a glare. And how exactly am I supposed to do that? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I don't know, Justin replied, shrugging. You're the one who screwed him over. You figure it out. Hell, sleep with him if you have to. Shouldn't be that hard. You managed it for years when you were married. He leaned closer, his tone hardening. But let me make one thing clear. We've got bills to pay, a mortgage hanging over our heads, and if either of us loses our job, we're screwed. So fix it. Allison didn't respond. She just stared at Justin, feeling a wave of disgust wash over her. Moments like this made her feel less like a partner and more like a tool Justin used to get what he wanted. Over the years, he treated her more like property than a wife, expecting her to use her looks to manipulate others for his schemes. And when he wanted sex, he didn't ask. He just took. Their appointment that Saturday led them to a sprawling 25-acre ranch. As they drove up the long driveway, the size and grandeur of the property stunned them. When they rang the bell, a charming young woman with a thick southern accent greeted them. Hi, y'all. Come on in and make yourselves at home, she said with a warm smile. Once inside, Allison and Justin were awestruck. The mansion looked like something out of lifestyles of the rich and famous. As they wandered through the house, they saw co-workers mingling and laughing, many treating the event like a farewell party, knowing layoffs were imminent. The smell of barbecue wafted through the air, adding to the festive atmosphere. Spotting Alan, they made their way toward him. Sir, this is a beautiful home, Allison said, trying to sound polite and impressed. Alan chuckled. Oh, this isn't my house, he replied casually. Just then, Tyler walked up, briefly glancing at Allison and Justin before turning to speak with Alan in fluent Japanese. Allison's stomach dropped. Tyler hadn't even acknowledged her, and now he was speaking a language she hadn't realized he knew. She tried to play it cool, but her nerves betrayed her. What did you just say, Tyler? She asked, her irritation evident. Alan answered for him, grinning. He asked if I like the house. Allison frowned. If it's not yours, whose house is it? Alan's grin widened, and his tone turned almost gleeful. It belongs to Tyler, of course. Allison's jaw dropped. She struggled to process the idea that her ex-husband now owned such a lavish property. Before she could respond, the young woman who had greeted them earlier walked up. Tyler, could you tell Russell to bring up more wine and beer from the cellar? She asked sweetly. Tyler nodded and walked off to handle it. Alan turned to the woman. Susan, you've done an amazing job with the house, he complimented her. Why, thank you, Alan, she replied, beaming. And did you see the new pools we added? Allison and Justin followed them outside, where they were met with the sight of an Olympic-sized pool, a lap pool, and a grotto. Allison felt her stomach twist. This was the life I wanted. How did Tyler end up with it? Susan continued chatting with Alan, mentioning the cost of the renovations and casually revealing that she and Tyler were planning to start a family soon. Tyler walked up in time to hear her last comment and playfully smacked her on the behind. Don't worry, baby. We'll get there. But for now, let's just enjoy us, he said with a smile. Allison spent the rest of the evening in a fog of bitterness and regret. Justin, meanwhile, seemed to be enjoying himself, flirting shamelessly with every woman he encountered. When he made a move on Susan, however, he miscalculated. She slapped him hard enough to leave a mark, and when Justin reacted angrily, Tyler stepped in. A tense moment followed, ending with Justin backing down after Tyler's warning gaze made it clear who was in charge. Despite their missteps, neither Allison nor Justin's names appeared on the layoff list. They did, however, receive small pay cuts. Over the next year, Allison and Justin's marriage crumbled. One night, Justin brought home a few co-workers who, with his encouragement, spent hours with Allison in a way that left no doubt about how little he respected her. The next morning, she left, leaving behind a note that read simply, "I left him for you." Justin didn't care. He'd always seen her as disposable. A month later, Justin was found dead in his bathtub, his wrist slit. Next to him was a positive HIV test result. Allison moved west, taking a retail job with one of the company's stores. Before leaving, she tried to visit Tyler to apologize, but when she saw him in the yard, playing with his beautiful wife and their children, she turned away. She drove off and cried for days afterward. Years later, Allison lay in a hospital bed battling cancer. The chemo wasn't working, and she knew her time was running out. One day, she came across a feature article about Tyler in a business magazine. He was now a Fortune 500 CEO, happily married to Susan, with 5 children and 15 grandchildren. As she put the magazine down, she glanced at her only companion, a cat she'd named Tyler. It was the closest she'd ever come to having another man like him. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel. Bye.